in to the 49ers Rush podcast, and here is your host, John Chapman.
Welcome to another episode of the 49ers Rush podcast. I'm your host, John Chapman, and I am so excited. Here we are. It is Sunday whenever I am recording. This is the week. The week starts on Sunday, and man, training camp starts in a quick 6 days. Players report in 5. We are going to have nonstop podcast very, very shortly. So the news cycle for training camp is absolutely unbelievable nowadays. It's funny. I always cancel my cable membership as soon as the Super Bowl ends. I do most of my draft stuff online because I watch all my own content, and then I always re-up this week. So I re-upped this morning, and I am crazy excited because it is NFL Network, Training Camp Live, whatever I can get my information on, that's what I'm going to do. So this is a great week. My wife is already upset because, man, it's going to be just pure NFL football for a very long time starting this week. So, a couple things that I want to talk to you about today. We are going to be going over the offensive position battles through training camp of the most significance. I put a poll out there, which one you guys thought was the most important, and I'll talk through that. So we're going to go through position by position on offense. If you want to listen to the defensive battles, that's the previous episode. So pause this one, go listen to the defensive battles. It's the episode right before this, then come back and listen to the offensive ones. And after we finish the offensive battles, we are going to go through an injury update from minicamp and OTAs and all those things, and what to expect from all of these players and what that's going to look like this week. That way, you shouldn't be surprised because, this is our third year going in with, this front office, and so we should be okay with how we see everything playing out, because they've already kind of telegraphed exactly what they're going to do with players that have been injured during training camp. So we kind of know what to expect. So the goal today is, with the injury segment, the second portion of this podcast, is to pump the brakes so that once, you see on the bottom of the teleprompter on NFL or ESPN or wherever, so-and-so didn't practice today, that's okay. That is 100% okay. Now, there are going to be some ones that if they do show up, I'll show you which ones to be alarmed about. But let's jump into it without further, holding back. And offensive position battles to watch. I put up on Twitter a poll, and I said, what is the most important offensive battle that's important to you? Which one do you see as the most important? And you guys chose slot wide receiver. 44% of all votes went to slot wide receiver, 37% to the running back, 12% to the backup quarterback, and then just a measly 7% to the number 2 tight end, which is interesting. Now, that number 2 tight end spot is very, very important to me, but you guys didn't choose that one. So we're going to go over all of those and more today. So let's jump right in with what you guys chose was number 1, the slot wide receiver position. Now, I think the 3 wide receivers that we are going to have on the field, or the 3 wide receivers we'll have on the field at the same time, and this order is going to be Dante Pettis, Deebo Samuel, our second-round pick, and Marquise Goodwin. Now, the problem is that's going to be our between-the-20s 3 wide receiver sets, not on third down. If it's third down, those are not the wide receivers we're going to have out there. Probably going to sub out one of those 3 and put in a true slot guy, and we don't know who that's going to be. In the past, it's been Trent Taylor, but it's not just up to him. The back injury was huge last year. A lot of people are expecting a huge bounce back because of our new wide receiver coach that we have added in Wes Welker and how their games are so similar, and people are expecting Trent Taylor to take a huge step forward, which would be amazing. But it's not his job locked up. Trent Taylor, Richie James, we go out in the 3rd round and draft Jalen Hurd, who's a big slot wide receiver. He played predominantly out of his slot last year at Baylor, and I think that's where he's going to wind up. But due to injuries and lots of other things, he's got a little bit of time. And then Jordan Matthews, who's also played that big slot role. So we have the 2 small shifty guys in Trent Taylor and Richie James, and then we have our 2 kind of big mismatch slot guys in Jalen Hurd and Jordan Matthews. And the NFL seems to be trending in this direction of getting away from the Julian Edelman type and going after these huge big slot guys. Larry Fitzgerald did it the last few years under Bruce Arians' system. You have Juju Smith-Schuster doing that in Pittsburgh. Everybody went with these small nickel slot corners to try to match up with the shifty smaller guys. In the NFL, usually what happens is, well, if they're going to do that, then we're going to do this. So eventually that spot's going to be Jalen Hurts, but I do not see him winning that role early on. Maybe by the bye week, week 4, week 5, he'll start to get more snaps, but he's got a huge learning curve. Coming from Tennessee as a running back, he's only played wide receiver 1 year in his entire career. So that's something to look forward to. So now here's the deal. Okay, if we're looking at the smaller guys, Trent Taylor and Richie James. Personally, whenever I first did my projected roster, I said Richie James probably, but that was before OTAs and minicamp. Trent Taylor looked great. He came out and, he worked a lot with the ones. And I think if it's going to be third and short, that's the guy that I would want out there now. But I do not believe that there is a way with the depth that we have at this roster to keep both Trent Taylor and Richie James. It's one or the other. Who's going to win that? I think it's pretty close to a coin flip. I know a lot of people really believe Trent Taylor is going to be the guy, and I don't think they're wrong. But Richie James has a lot of potential to offer because of the return game, whether that's punts or kickoff return, and he is much more explosive whenever it comes to speed and big play potential, which Kyle Shanahan seems to value very, very much. So this is what I'm going to be watching big time. I really do believe Trent Taylor's going to get the first team snaps right out of the gate. He's been there longer. He's healthier now, so I think that's what's going to happen. But I am very curious. What I'm going to be paying attention to day 1 and day 2, who gets the second team reps out of the other 3? Richie James, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Matthews. Who's getting those slot snaps whenever they go team? Who's getting those slot snaps whenever they go 7-on-7? Because I think that's going to be indicative of, it's going to let us know exactly what the coaches are wanting to do at that position. So if, for some reason, Hurd is already getting early Team 2 snaps, I think the writing's going to be on the wall that Richie James and possibly Rashard Matthews could be gone. So the first team snaps, Trent Taylor's going to get those, but who is going to be in contention for that second team and who's going to be in the lead? So one of the things that I'll update continuously on this podcast is going to be, hey, slot wide receivers going this way, because it's one of the competitive and most depth that we have on offense, but it's very telling to see what Kyle Shanahan wants to do long-term there. So something to watch out there. Now, the second most voted position was the running back position, and this is a starter one. Not like the slot one. I don't think any of those guys are going to be out there in 2 wide receiver sets. Sometimes they will, but probably not early on, especially without injuries. But the running back position is a who knows. Probably the most competitive and most depth at the running back position in the entire NFL. Maybe you could argue Philadelphia is up there, but still, even them, I would say, they don't have 3 guys in competition for the starting number 1 running back spot. And perhaps we don't either, because I think it is going to be a revolving door, and I think everybody's going to get their chances, and whoever catches fire, the hot hand, I think you just stay with that. Now, coming out of OTAs in minicamp, Tevin Coleman has to be in the lead, because none of the other 3 guys, Matt Breida didn't get any snaps because of his injury. Jet McKinnon didn't get any team snaps because of his recovery from the ACL. Raheem Mostert didn't get any snaps because of where he was at. So Coleman has the most experience in Kyle Shanahan's system. He was with him in his 2 years in Atlanta, and he was also with this team all through OTAs and minicamp. So he has the experience, which trumps even Matt Breida. I love Matt Breida. He is my personal favorite. However, the way that I see this shaking out is, I did my projections for the entire offense. And, if you want to go back and listen to that episode, that's fine. But just to summarize the amount of touches and targets that I project between these 3 over the course of the season, I have Coleman getting the most touches out of everybody. I have him with 137 rush attempts and 31 pass targets. I have Matt Breida coming in second with 124 rush attempts and 27 targets. And then I have Jerick McKinnon with 82 rush attempts and 51 targets. So that kind of lets you just see the way in which I see these guys being used. And even more, if we want to get more specific than that, I think that they are going to have roles based on where we are on the field. So, for example, Jerick McKinnon is going to be the running back on passing down situations in between the 20s. So if we're not in goal line and we're not backed up, I think Jerick McKinnon's going to be out there predominantly, especially on third downs. Like, Kyle Shanahan likes to keep the different positional groups and personnel groups out there for the entire drive, especially on first, second, and third down, because it doesn't allow the defense to sub. You can keep Jerick McKinnon out there in the middle of the field just fine. However, if it's going to be short yardage situation or if it's going to be goal line situation, I do not think we're going to see Jet in there very often. It's just not what he does. I think Breida and Coleman, that is going to be their role. If it's short yardage, you got Breida and Coleman in there. If you're with, in the red zone, those are the guys. And perhaps even Jalen Hurd. He's probably the best short yardage running back that we have. He is a monster of a man. I'm curious to see how many touches he's going to get in that position. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, what about Kyle Juszczyk? Where's he going to be in all this? Kyle Juszczyk is a decoy that forces the defense to stay in bigger personnel packages. He only had 8 rushing attempts the last 2 years. Like, he's not a guy. Yes, he's in there at fullback, and yes, he will get way more passing targets than he will rushing attempts. But the problem is, and why Kyle Shanahan loves the fullback so much is, when you keep him in there, you don't know if it's going to be an empty 5-wide set because Juice can split out just fine, and that's going to put 2 linebackers in a wide receiver covering basically split out fullbacks or wide receivers, and defenses hate that. So the big reason why Juszczyk snaps are always so high is because it's like a middle finger to the defensive coordinator from Kyle Shanahan. So he's going to be out there, but don't look for him to be too involved in the running game. Now, 12% of you guys said that the third most important position was backup quarterback. And this one is going to be a lot of fun. And I hate to say this, I am in Team Mullins big time. I think that if I was to put a percentage on who's going to win the backup job, I'd say 75% goes to Mullins, 25% goes to CJ. However, the problem is with the way that they practice. Nick Mullins sucks in practice. CJ is great in practice. He's not good in games. So, how much stock do you put in this? How much of this competition was won last year when Mullins came in and played great for a backup quarterback? And again, it's a little bit of I don't want to say black eye, but it looks bad on the front office when you spend a third-round pick on a quarterback and then they get beat out by an undrafted free agent. That doesn't look good, but hopefully, the law of sunken costs, we are not buying into this front office anyway. We just put the best player out there. Now, in the offseason and during minicamp with Jimmy Garoppolo hurt, he only took 1 snap with team the entire minicamp and offseason, and that was kind of a mistake, and they got him out there right away. But they alternated days between Mullins and CJ. So I think that's going to continue as far as the backup job goes. And the goal would be it stays that way until the preseason games start to happen. I doubt that Jimmy Garoppolo gets any snaps in the first preseason game. Maybe a few in the second, plays a quarter in the third, and that's it. In my opinion, that's what I would do. And what I would do is you want Nick Mullins to ball out. So there's a couple options here. Personally, I want to keep Mullins as our backup. However, if there is a signature quarterback in the NFL that goes down in the preseason and is out for the season, that trade market, Nick Mullins is at the top of the list on every single NFL team for doomsday scenario. We have to get a quarterback in here. I think that you could pull a fourth, something like, you get a 4th round pick, you give up Nick Mullins in a 7th or Nick Mullins in a 6th. That's a possibility. And if you do that trade, you recoup a draft pick, and then you keep CJ as your backup. That's a strong possibility that we could see happen. However, again, I would prefer to keep Mullins as my backup and just release CJ. CJ will get picked up as a 3rd quarterback somewhere else. But we do not need to carry 3 QBs just because of where we are. And CJ's not practice squad eligible because of all the time that he has had. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Now let's jump into the number 2 tight end spot, because this is going to be a very interesting battle. It's 3 guys. Garrett Selleck has been that guy for a long time. Career Niner. Absolutely love this guy. Kind of the epitome of what it means to be faithful to a franchise and to stick it out and do all the dirty work. He's great. However, last year he was awful. Then you compound that with age, getting older, bad year. He's still not cleared with his back and concussion issue. Now, this is interesting in and of itself because, early on in the offseason, I was like, whoa, if his concussion is still an issue, he needs to be done with the NFL. He hasn't played a game in 6 months. Well, the way that the NFL injury protocol works is until you're cleared of all injuries, you can't be cleared of any. So it's really his back issue. But here's the deal with Selleck. We don't really need to get him snaps. We know exactly who he is and what he offers. We have so much film on him. Everybody knows. So because of his injury, you want to take it super slow with him and make sure he's 100% back if he comes back at all. And this gives you a chance to look at the other two guys. The other two guys, Caden Smith, who we drafted out of Stanford this year, and Levine Toilolo, who was with, again, we see this theme so much with Kyle Shanahan. He wants people that he knows he works with. He was with him in Atlanta, so he knows the system. So if we look at these two, Smith is as close to a lock on this roster as any of these guys are. But the question is, can he take over the number 2 spot for week 1, or is he going to be the kind of tight end number 3 and special teams guy? Or does Shanahan go with the guy he knows the most in Toilolo out of Atlanta? He knows the system. He's a bigger guy. He blocks fairly well. He's a great red zone threat, which is huge for this offense because, again, if you want to knock Kyle Shanahan in any way, it's just red zone efficiency, and that's really it. His offense has been stellar despite injuries across the board. We've had a top 15 offense since he's got here as far as yards and all those first downs. Offense, efficiency, all those things, all those metrics, just not touchdowns. Field goals, which we do way too damn much, but if we can improve in one area on this team on the offensive side, it's got to be red zone efficiency, scoring touchdowns, not field goals. And I think that Caden Smith and Levine Toilolo, whoever can prove during training camp that you're going to cash it in when we call you in the red zone or in short yardage situation, I think that's who's going to win it. Personally, I think Caden Smith's going to win this job. He was one of my favorite players that I have rated super high on where we drafted him. I had a 3rd-round grade on him. We got him several rounds later, so I love these guys. But if both of these younger guys can prove that they can do the job and it's neck and neck, I think Selleck's going to be done. I think we'd give him the option. We can cut you or you can retire. We'll see what happens there. Now, another tight end that's going to be interesting is Ross Dwelly, who I think is a practice squad candidate if he clears through the waiver system. I don't think that he has a shot in unseating any one of the other 3, but he is a guy that we will probably keep around just because he's such a good blocker, and he does provide a lot of just extra benefit there. Now, the last offensive position I want to talk about before we get into special teams and injuries is the swing offensive tackle. Our offensive tackles are set, and I would argue top 3 in the NFL. Staley is unbelievable. He continues to just perform at such a high level, the number 1 rated run blocker in the entire NFL for all offensive linemen. And Mike McGlinchey, we redraft last year's draft right now. I think McGlinchey's going to be a top 6 pick. I think he outperformed his number 9 draft stock, and he's unbelievable. So we are set there. Now the problem is, what do we do behind them? We go out and we get Justin School in the draft, and we still have Sean Coleman, who we traded for to the Browns last year, who was inactive. He didn't really get a lot of work. But we have these 2 guys that are fighting for that swing tackle. Should be School's job to lose. We have seen what Coleman can do, but we'll just have to wait and see. But understand this. If either one of our tackles goes down, we don't have depth there. We don't have good depth there. This season's going to be rough. There's going to be injuries with every NFL team. However, one of the positions that we could not afford to lose is one of our offensive tackles. Luckily for us, both of those guys have played almost every single game since they have started playing football. 2 of the most durable tackles. If you go to McGlinchey, I know he's only played 1 year. He has never missed a game going all the way back to Pop Warner. So very, very dependable guys. Very excited about that. And let's move on to special teams because our returner positions, they're going to be interesting. Kyle Shanahan, again, I spoke about this earlier. He values guys that can create big plays on their own. And he is valued, if you look at the drafts that we've done, Dante Pettis, all-time leading punt returner for touchdowns in college football history. Deebo Samuel, he scored touchdowns 6 different ways in his career. Trent Taylor, absolutely incredible punt returner at Louisiana Tech. Richie James, same thing. DJ Reed, same thing. He values these guys that can create on their own. Mostert, Breida, Marquise Goodwin, fastest player in the NFL probably. All these different guys that are just so explosive. Now the question is, at punt returner, what do you do? Dante Pettis is our number 1 wide receiver. You could say, our tight end, Greg Kittle's really our number 1 guy. He's going to lead in targets and yards and all those things. But your number 1 outside wide receiver is Dante Pettis. Do you risk putting him at punt returner, which is, a high contact position? You're going to get hit. You're going to take some violence there. What do we do there? I personally wouldn't mind Dante Pettis getting some kicks, and we saw this some last year whenever everybody was healthy. And what they do is, Pettis is our long punt returner. And what I mean by that is, he is the guy that is going to be fielding punts whenever there's a chance for a return. Trent Taylor or Richie James, whoever makes the roster out of those two, is going to be our safe punt returner. So if they're punting from like the 40 yards and end, and there's going to be a chance of a fair catch or backed up against the goal line, keep Dante Pettis out of there. Put Trent Taylor or Richie James back there and allow them to be the safe punt returner. But if our defense holds a team and they're punting within their own 20 and we're going to have a lot of field to make a big play, I don't mind Dante Pettis being out there for that because he's just so good in open field situations. So hopefully that's what we will see. DJ Reed, as I said, is also a possibility. It's very interesting. Just on, what day was that? On the 19th, just a few days ago, DJ Reed tweeted out saying, are there any high school punters in the LA area that are looking to get some extra work in? Because it seems like he is going to be competing for that spot. DJ Reed is a lock on this roster. I know we talked about him on the defensive side. His potential's high. However, he is not going to be a defensive starter. He's going to probably back up one of the safety positions and the slot corner. But with somebody that's that talented, you've got to find ways to get him on the field. And for somebody that's not an offensive or defensive starter, if you're going to be rostered, you got to contribute on special teams. So DJ Reed is a guy that it seems like they told him, hey, you're going to be fighting for a punt returner spot. So he's going to be out there. Curious to see who's going to win that. We have some of the best punt returners in the entire NFL. Yes, none of them have done it at the level successfully with where we are, but it doesn't matter. This is one of the things that translates from college game to NFL game. And if we stay with kick returner, DJ Reed's going to be one of the two back there no matter what. Now, the other spot is going to be interesting because I think they want it to be Richie James, but as we said before, Richie James is not a lock on this roster. Trent Taylor or Richie James will be there. So Trent Taylor will help out at punts, or Richie James will help out on kick returns. That's just what it's going to be, but if for some reason he doesn't, there's lots of guys that we could put back there. Mostert, super quick, super fast. Matt Breida, if he's going to be active, as they're going to probably rotate, as Matt Mayoko said, that running back position. If you do start 3 running backs and juice on your active roster, Matt Breida is a guy that will be back there returning kicks. Super, super fast. It's funny, we have 2 running backs. I don't care about Madden ratings too much, but it's interesting. We have 2 running backs that are the fastest in the NFL, and that is Matt Breida and Tevin Coleman. So we have 2 of the fastest rated speed guys on Madden. Take that for what you want, whatever. Deebo Samuel could be back there, and Marquise Goodwin as well. So speed, big play guys, they are out there. Now, before I jump into our injury update and what to expect, I do want to say our next episode is going to be a question satchel. I love these. These are my favorite episodes that we do. So if you have any questions about the 49ers and training camp, dates, times, whatever, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at JL_Chapman and just say, hey, tag it question satchel, which is the greatest name ever for a Q&A, I think, or a mailbag episode. So let me know what you think. One of my favorite questions, we've got about 4 or 5 that have already come through, is what does a player have to do to get into Kyle Shanahan's doghouse? And so I'm really excited about that. Went back and watched some film, brought up some Carlos Hyde things because I think he was one of the first players to do that. And we're going to talk about that. But I need some more questions. So hit me up on @JL_Chapman, or you can email me 49ersRushPodcast@gmail.com. So again, any way that you want to get your questions into, I'd really appreciate it. So again, Twitter @JL_Chapman, or just email me 49ersRushPodcast@gmail.com. Now, let's jump in through injuries and draft picks because we've got some issues. Right off the bat, our front office has been very positive. They're a very positive group that always says, oh, they're going to be ready by training camp. Oh, they're going to be ready by training camp. Oh, they're going to be ready by training camp. That's not the situation. Never is. You always want your coaches to support you in front of the press, and that is a great thing from a team-building perspective. You can't go out there and say, yeah, he's probably not going to be ready, and, bring that negativity around somebody. However, that's going to be the case. So everybody's going to be eased back into training camp practices, especially if they had an injury designation during minicamp and or OTAs. So Jimmy Garoppolo, most important player to our franchise, he took one team snap in minicamp. My guess is he will be eased in day 2 and day 3. Day 1, he's just going to go through the drills. Day 2, he'll do 7-on-7. Day 3, I look for him to start taking team reps there. So do not flip out whenever you see it saying Jimmy Garoppolo's still not ready. You've got to be smart with these things. The first day and the second day of training camp is really the first and second day of minicamp and OTAs. You have to start from square one, and you got to build up. Kyle Shanahan even said this. You can't skip those installation building block days. Everybody has to be there no matter how long you've been with the franchise. So look for him to be kind of slowly phased in. But I'll tell you this right now. Jimmy Garoppolo's knee is fine. It's not even his plant leg. He's going to be just fine. Don't worry about it. Now, Nick Bosa, couple issues here. He tightened up his hamstring in OTAs, but the bigger problem is he is still not signed. There are 6 players that were drafted out of 250-plus guys that have not signed. The 49ers have 2 of the 6. Now, this is problematic for a few reasons, but more importantly, it has to do with their sports agency. CAA, Tom Condon, if you follow the business side of sports, that's their MO. They had 6 players drafted in the first round. 4 of those guys are still holding out. And for people who are like, man, we shouldn't draft Nick Bosa. I told you to draft Quinnen Williams. Well, guess what? Quinnen Williams is actually holding out as well. Daniel Jones still holding out, and so is Brian Burns. All of those guys are represented by CAA. Quinnen Williams is not. He's with Lil Wayne's sports agency. But Deebo Samuel is the one that's probably most problematic because Bosa, he's going to be slowly brought in. Coming off of his core injury, then he tightened up his hamstring. Don't repeat the mistake. Ease him in and allow him to get comfortable. Defensive end is not one of those spots that really needs a whole bunch of snaps to sync up. Wide receiver is. If Deebo Samuel is not signed, that's going to be problematic, especially for somebody that we consider our number 2 wide receiver from the start. So we need to have him out there getting snaps day 1. Very, very important. So I would expect Bosa to be a full go once we get to day 3 if he's signed on the start. If he misses a day or 2, you just got to push that back about 3 days. So if he doesn't sign till day 2 or 3, it isn't the end of the world, but then you're pushing that back an extra 3 days. So pump the brakes. Don't give up on a prospect just because he hasn't signed or he's not practicing in the first couple of days. Running backs, man, lots of injuries with Breida, McKinnon, and Mostert. None have taken snaps at all. So positional drills day 1, then slow phase them in. Again, Tevin Coleman is going to be the only clear starter out there for the first couple of days. And then it's going to be curious to see how they all get brought back in, Breida, McKinnon, and Mostert. But no cause for alarm there, even if they're not practicing that first week. Running backs, when they're healthy, you just run the ball. Again, they're going to be just fine. Jimmy Ward's going to be an interesting one. He will not be ready for a while. I know there's been videos out there of his rehab process, but the problem is with the collarbone, it just takes time. And if you rush that back during contact, man, one hit and it's done. So he might be fine for positional drills. He'll probably dress. He's going to be no contact probably until week 3 of the preseason. You know, I've talked about this before. There's no need to rush him back. We know who he is. We need to see what's happened behind him. He's just going to be a fail-safe across basically our entire secondary. So, again, week 3 of the preseason, he's not going to be cleared for contact for quite a while. So, and for those of you that are saying cut him, you can't cut Jimmy Ward. And I wish you could have. I wish you wouldn't have signed him. Period, but he signed a 1-year deal, and you would lose out on over $3 million if you cut him now. You'd save less than $1 million by cutting him. We need the depth in the secondary. Yes, I understand he's not going to be winning us games, but with that 1-year deal, you can't cut him. It's just a total financial loss. It doesn't help us at all. Debo, I talked about, he would be full go day 1. He just had a minor hip / hamstring issue. He would be full go day 1. I truly believe that. It just depends on if he signs. And Garrett Selleck, I've talked about him already. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Next up this week, we do have our Q&A. So again, get those questions in on Twitter at JL_Chapman or email me 49ersRushPodcast@gmail.com. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the listen. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you listen. That helps us out the most. Oh, man, we are so close. Stay strong, faithful.